election changed as AI came to be integrated into electoral campaigns?
It has changed everything, but also not so much yet completely new, but it has changed the game because it's just more accelerated now and people are so much more playful. And I mean, there are a lot of trends there, but it's an interesting field to look at right now, what is going on.
Hello and welcome to Technocracy. I am Heena Goswami, editorial consultant with the IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. Fair elections are a cornerstone of our democracy. And like all aspects of our democratic lives, electoral processes have also embraced technology throughout history. Whether it was publicizing a cause or a candidate through newspaper or later television and now phone calls, electoral processes have utilized technology to add to the fanfare. Technologies such as e-voting have ensured fairer processes and wider inclusion. AI-powered chatbots now provide real-time information about polling location, candidates, and voting procedure, making the electoral process more accessible and transparent. Further, automated systems have made election administration more efficient by managing large data sets with speed and precision, significantly reducing human errors. This leads to more reliable and timely results, thereby reinforcing public trust in the electoral process. But the most important role that technology has played is in communicating messages the candidate wants to put out to the people at large. It does make sense, right? Because the more visible a cause or a candidate is, the more they will be heard and supported and elected. And hence, the use of mass media such as newspaper, television, radio, and now social media. The use of social media for political campaign goes as far back as 2008, when Obama campaigns pioneered the use of social media for grassroots organizing. Social media has fundamentally transformed electoral campaigns by enabling direct voter engagement, targeted advertising, and grassroots mobilization. Campaigns use data analytics to target specific voter segments with personalized ads and messages based on their interest and online behavior. Social media also offers a less expensive alternative to traditional advertising on television or in print, helping political newcomers and smaller parties compete with well-funded incumbents. Social media platforms are powerful tools for organizing volunteers, soliciting small donations, and driving voter turnout through hashtag movements and viral campaigns. However, the use of social media for political ends and electoral campaigns has invited much controversy. The 2014 elections in India, regarded as the first social media elections in India's political history, kick-started a social media revolution in Indian politics. And through its use, BJP was able to sway many young voters. Social media's role in the 2016 US presidential election was equally significant and complex, marked by both direct campaigning and manipulation through misinformation and data misuse. The election highlighted how social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter could be weaponized to influence voter behavior, resulting in lasting concerns about data privacy and the integrity of democratic processes. And now, along with social media, there's another player in the game, and that is AI. Recent advancement in artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, could have an unprecedented impact on electoral processes. Application of Gen AI tools to translate text and audio simultaneously into many languages may prove to be a key asset in multi-language democracies such as India. We've also seen an increasing number of examples of how campaigns use advanced technology such as large language model to send personalized AI-generated fundraising emails in the US campaign or AI-generated videos of candidates making personal appeal to voters in the Indian parliamentary election. These digital innovations offer opportunities to improve electoral efficiency and voter engagement, but also raise concerns about potential misuse. One of the biggest concerns associated with AI is that it has opened floodgates of misinformation and disinformation. The fact that AI can be used to launch cyber attacks, produce deepfakes, and spread disinformation could destabilize democratic processes, threaten the integrity of political discourse, and erode public trust. The growing sophistication of AI-generated content makes disinformation more convincing and emotionally impactful and undermines truth, facts, and safety, adding a new dimension to the manipulation of human behavior and contributes to polarization and instability on a vast scale. And as AI technology advances, distinguishing between authentic information and falsehood is becoming more complex. Also, researchers have found evidence that online actors are using AI, sometimes in the form of bots, to spread disinformation, including deepfakes, on a daily basis, complicating the long-settled debate over issues such as national sovereignty. To delve a little more into the use of AI in electoral campaigns, today we are joined by Dr. Katja Muñoz. Dr. Muñoz is a senior research fellow at DGAP, German Council on Foreign Relations Center for Geopolitics, Geoeconomics and Technology. Her research delves into the intricate interplay between social media and politics. Her research encompasses intersection of artificial intelligence and democracy, with a particular focus on emerging AI trends that reshape online information integrity. Welcome to Technocracy. And the first thing that I want to begin by asking is, on a surface level, how has the face of election changed as AI came to be integrated into electoral campaigns?
It's the perfect question to ask because everybody wants to understand what impact AI might have on electoral campaigns, right? And we actually had the same question when we delved into this research project last year, because it was super election year and because we knew that so many countries would be, explore using AI to see, what kind of sticks, what is useful, what not. We saw a lot, but in general terms, I would say AI in general has a certain duality to its character, right? Because on the one sense, we saw a lot of examples of where it could actually increase political participation by providing personalized information access via chatbots, for instance, which we thought was very interesting. There were some attempts of providing AI-assisted dialogues, like civic dialogues where people could interact with each other, not on social media. So there is not this engagement algorithm behind it. So that kind of also helped really drive conversations that matter and not listening only to the loudest voice in that sense. And it's very cheap. So it kind of democratized access. But there's a caveat I find, because although it democratizes access because it is almost for free in that sense to a certain extent, not everybody has access to AI, even though it might be for free, because not everybody might use it in rural areas, depending, global south, but also in the global north, not everybody is using AI. So yes, access is democratized, but still it's not equity that we see here in a sense. And of course, we have to look at the risks because those are the ones that we are trained to look at. I find that that's a muscle that is very easily worked, whereas if we talk about chances, it's very difficult to always think about the chances, right? And if we look into the risks, I can say, for instance, we've seen a lot of customized propaganda, for instance. And we saw a lot of memes. So we saw a lot of synthetic media used by political parties, not only by every other person trying to jump in and monetize or whatever their reason might be, but to kind of consolidate and mobilize their own base. It's not even to convince others to vote for them, but using memes and using cultural, contextual language in order to kind of captivate them. Why? Because it's so easy to generate a picture by now. It's almost for free, right? You'd pay 25 euros or dollars in that sense, and you have access. And that was back in the day, 2024. Right now with Google Nano Banana, it's for free, even generating pictures. So yes, we see a lot of that. But we also see a lot of an erosion of the trust towards information because by now there's this kind of reality crisis. I would say it's not in the crisis in the sense that everybody's going mad, but in the sense of there's a cynicism that I find that people see stuff online and, it might be AI. So what is real? What is authentic anymore? And those are questions that are very important to answer because it's important for us to understand that access to reliable information is one of the pillars that democracy actually prescribes. That we trust our government, that we trust the information that they rely. And if we cannot trust, if we don't know what is real and what is not, then obviously our trust in democracy also declines as a collateral damage. So you have to be very careful in yes, using AI because it is a great tool to personalize and to use for your campaigns. And I'm not saying anything against it. You have to be careful, though, of the short-term goals and the long-term goals because the short-term might be mobilizing people, bashing others, especially political opponents, or polluting the information space. But in the long term, if we want to continue as a democracy, we must maintain a specific level of trust within the information space, right? So there's that. But I also want to highlight not only the visible AI that we see, but also the invisible AI that has been used a lot, like the data mining and data management that is being used then to target, right? Or algorithmic visibility and reach that is always being manipulated now, and which is also AI, if you want to look at it. Platform algorithms are AI, older AI. We're not even aware anymore that it is AI, but it's something also that has to be taken into account. So I would say it has changed everything, but also not so much yet completely new, but it has changed the game because it's just more accelerated now and people are so much more playful and I mean there are a lot of trends there, but it's an interesting field to look at right now, what is going on.
2024 was definitely the year of super elections, and India also held its general election. And one interesting way in which AI was used in India was that dead leaders were resurrected and their videos and audios were sent to appeal to the voters. But again, the point that it is used to mobilize or consolidate the base that already exists, and it wouldn't appeal to people who might are on the other side of the fence, but it just consolidates your voter even more. And
Yes.
talking of 2024, were there new trends that emerged in the use of AI? And did the integration of AI into campaigns also have an impact on the electoral outcome, or was it only consolidating the existing base?
I would say, I mean, did we see this one disruption? I don't think so. I think there were two cases, but not in India. I would say one in Slovakia, where I'm not sure if it had like a lot of impact. And there we had a synthetic audio, like a deepfake audio, which implied that there's corruption going on. Before the election, it was by so the synthetic audio had the incumbent candidate saying that, they want to actually manipulate the election and he lost, but he lost in any case, both parties that competed, they're very much into the statistic of margin of error. So it's very difficult to say. So in order to understand if something stuck or not, you would have to look at proxy variables. That's what we did, right? We only assume based on looking after those proxy variables. And there was the trust in government, trust in media, trust in institutions and stuff. And surprisingly, well, first of all, the opposition party won. And the other thing is that trust in government rose. So we suppose that there was some impact, but we're not sure how much because it was within the margin of error, right? So it's very difficult to say, is there this one disruption? The other thing we saw in Turkey is that one of the candidates, but that was already in 2023, I think, one of the candidates was a male, and he declined to continue campaigning because there was a deepfake of him, a porn, like an explicit content deepfake, and that was too much for him. So he went out of it because it was just too much personal damage. So those were the ones that affected elections. The one in terms of, I think, you know, having a role in, not completely, not the only reason, but having a role in Slovakia and in Turkey, I think it obviously affected an election because one candidate decided to not continue anymore. So that's also an effect, even though, like other candidates were still there, it's still a major effect I find in my opinion. But is there like another major disruption as in terms of like the election changed outcome? I don't think so. But I think there are some aspects that are new. For instance, something that I find very interesting that we're seeing more and more is this what I call liar's dividend, right? That you see something and it might be authentic, but then the person says, no, I mean, it has to be AI because I would never do that. So that's funny because all of a sudden, the person that actually, authentic content has to be evidenced. You as the one that has brought this evidence has to prove that it is real. So that's something completely new that we haven't seen before. And about the dead politicians, I find this is actually very funny. We saw that in India, we saw that in Indonesia, and we saw it in Italy. And I don't think it would stick in Germany. It depends really on the people, like on the context. But it's funny because we saw that in different places, global north, global south, and it was just they loved it. They played around with it. It was also, people from the families were asked if they were allowed to do that, and they agreed. And it's just, I don't know what to say. I that's what I'm saying. Like the creativity game is really big in terms of AI, which I find is always good for democracies because if you play around, it's a matter of like, you try to fight for the people, and that's actually what democracy is about, like trying to engage them. And if you find another way to do that, that's great because the other way around would be worse if you don't even try to engage, if you just, decide amongst each other. That would be centralized authoritarian decision making. And I find it's actually good for democracy to do and play around. I would say something that I find dangerous is the amount of data that is being collected and then used to hyper-personalize context or content in general. And I'm not saying, hey, in India, for instance, we saw this, I don't know to what extent it was done, but it was a story that went around the world about this subcontractor who created an avatar, and that avatar contacted people via WhatsApp. And some of those people weren't even aware that it was an AI avatar. They just thought the governor is calling them personally. I mean, I bet not everybody, believe that. But the point is, it's only possible because there's no data privacy to call somebody directly on WhatsApp. Then there's this hyper-personalized aspect of it. Are people, even if they might think it's an AI, maybe they might think it's great, like, but why should they have they provided their information to the campaign to be used in that way? I'm not so sure. And it provides another level of leverage towards, I wouldn't say manipulation, like in a bad way, but kind of trying to get people that it's actually better that they make their decision on their own. And this is kind of like a step too far, I find. But that's something that everybody needs to decide on themselves, right? Like civil society needs to inform society about the dangers of having no data privacy or not extensive data privacy in that sense and what it could lead to in that sense. I find also hyper-personalized contexts, for instance, can be used to radicalize or polarize societies even more, because even within the same city, you could send one message to one area, an affluent area, whereas you speak to another area and promise different things, right? And the problem is after the election is done, I mean, since we are in a democracy, you have to find consensus. And how do you find consensus if you hyper-personalize message so much, if you fragment society to such an extent that you actually might even contribute to polarization? It's very difficult to come together after that. So I find that you should always consider these questions when you start defining your campaign. But on the other side, I find not everybody thinks that way. That's an ethical way to think about it. There are others who just don't care, who just want to win. And they would not even consider it maybe like a danger of further polarization because that's their intent, right? So it's also a measure, yes, you have that to take that into account, but not everybody will. Also, that should be on your mind, right?
It's very interesting. The example of subcontractor that you give is actually from my hometown. I mean, not exactly my hometown, but the town where I had my graduation. I did my graduation. I have one off the script ethical dilemma that I want to ask you.
Mhm.
As if I were to become a public figure, and I've seen that we've seen that happening to a lot of female political figures, where a lot of their explicit, images, pornographic content is shared around them. If something were to come out which is a little obscene in nature, maybe it's true, but I say, oh, that's AI. Would it be unethical of me?
No, I mean, it's your way of protecting. I mean, why not? It might be AI. I don't know what to tell you. It's a matter of, I think it's also a normalization. Back in the day when AI was not possible to such an extent or accessible, where it was still a theoretical topic, it became really detrimental because everybody knew it was kind of authentic. Somebody took that picture of you, right? So I think the power of these obscene pictures in some societies where it's not too traditional still might actually lessen because now you know that it might be AI. It's not like a personal private moment and somebody exposed you, but it might just be a bad actor who has access to a free tool and he uses it and then pollutes it. So maybe it might even help, but it's still, in my opinion, a crime. And that's something that needs to be tackled in government because it is gender-based violence. And it might not only happen to women, it might happen to it's over sexualizing of children also, if kids have access to it like other children, but also of men who says that a man cannot be we saw that example in Turkey. So it's actually I think in Italy it's already been passed that non-consensual explicit content is now illegal, which is a great way to start. So this framework, the legal regulation or regulatory framework allows now people, if there is enough people, how do you say, if there's enough capacity to actually implement it, to legally go forward and ask platforms to take that content down. So I think it's a great, I mean, it's terrible because we know that AI content, I mean, over 90% is explicit content, right? But I find, as I said, maybe over time it will just be like the effect is lessened because we know that it might be crap, right? So I think, is it an ethical question? I think it's a defense. I mean, if you are confronted with content like that, why not use a defense that might be possible for you? I mean, I don't understand. It's very harsh content. It's not like, hey, I don't know, I don't like your hair.
So when I become a public figure, I just want to tell my audience that all negative content would be AI generated. One thing that we noticed in the context of Indian election that wherever AI was being used, it was more to propagate hateful campaigns, and we saw that in the US also. Uh, is that somewhat true in other countries, especially in the
Um,
global north?
yeah. So what we saw is that the parties that are more disruptive use more AI content. In Germany, we saw I mean, we saw AI content everywhere. It was barely used by the more political establishment, more by the far right parties that are not political establishment, but they're very much growing, so they're not so small anymore. But they're using guerrilla tactics. They're very flexible and agile. So over there, for instance, we saw definitely that they were the ones that used AI, and they also do it to deride political opponents in the campaign, not so much, but all of their followers do so, right? So I agree with the sentiment that there's a lot of AI slop being used to denigrate the opposing parties or democratic parties in that sense. What I also find very fascinating, for instance, that I saw a lot of, like, for instance, in the US, I saw a lot of AI content spread by official uh, accounts, right? Like Donald Trump kept sharing all the time some memes. He still does. The White House still, like, they all embrace AI to such an extent. They don't label it either because it's obviously AI, and that's what I find is funny, and that's what I find is actually more dangerous. I mean, in the EU we have this the EU AI Act, and one of those stipulations says that we need to label AI content. Always. Now, platforms say it's very difficult to implement this. Obviously, it is, I agree. But I have another point to make. I think it's correct to label AI content. Obviously, it's one of the first steps that you need to do, in order to be transparent. But some of that content is just very straightforward AI. There's no way it's not. And everybody understands it is if it's a comic strip or avatar, whatever. And the point is not to how do you say, it's not to change your opinion or to provide fake news, it's to create an emotional response. So it's not there to actually, how do you say it? It's to, spread disinformation or whatever. But as I said, to create a fear or to create an anger response, to engage in that. And in that sense, an AI label would not really change that effect. And I think that's something that needs to be understood very much more clear because here they say, oh, once it's labeled, it's okay. Everything is fine. We will all be very much, protected. We will not be protected because sometimes a picture says more than 1,000 words and it doesn't even have to be fake. It might be a future vision, just showing somebody a picture of how it might be if we continue on this track, which is not fake news. It's just an imagination, but still it invokes fear. And my first sentiment would be this is not the idea of what I think the future should look like. So I should probably switch over to the other party, right? Or vote for that because I don't want that kind of future. That's not what appeals to me. And I find that's so much more powerful. And that's why memes are so much out with AI because memes are just, it's a whole message in one picture, right? And you can do so much with it. And so much of it is so obviously either AI or some form of manipulation, but that doesn't really matter. It's about the context message that is embedded within those memes. So yes, I would say definitely a lot of AI slop, a lot of negative stuff to denigrate specific political opponents, especially from others. But I find that that's, again, something that doesn't really change your mind. It's more content that is used in order to pollute information space, in order to you not be able to see anything reliable anymore, or create, if you look at specific tactics, for instance, of influence operations, you know that there are some cognitive aspects. If you only see pictures of specific politician being made fun of, maybe of their weight, right? Then even though you might not have anything against it, that's something that sticks to your mind then. Oh, that, yeah, the fat politician, right? So it's a measure of kind of setting impressions as well. It's not so much so it has an intent. It has an intent and kind of affect us cognitively, but not so much to change our opinion on things. It's more to emotionalize certain aspects and pin impressions on us, I would say.
I think there's also something to be said about the level of political discourse around us at the moment. I feel that uh, earlier people used to lie, come to power, and then they would become sort of moderate, where they would couch their ideologies in kind
Mm.
ways. But now I feel that mask is no longer there, and people, I mean, there's no control over even the words that people say and the kind of things they put out, despite being heads of state and responsible public leaders. I mean, uh, along, it's very interesting to me. I have been very involved, I mean, from a distance in the US and India's election. And from US, we saw that there was a lot of money being poured by uh, large tech owners. I mean, Elon Musk being an example, and they also have control over algorithms and AI tools. Uh, So my question is that with borderless technologies such as AI, there was already this question of sovereignty. There are bots on the internet which are, sort of making people feel that there's a public anger or public reaction to on such some issues where there may be none. And we had this debate in the context of 2016 US election that Russia had bots on the internet. But we are also seeing instances now where Elon Musk is very much interested in the election in UK or in Germany, where they are supporting one party or campaigning against another. How do you view this?
It has a lot to do with ideology, but also is business basically, right? Because the parties that they support are on the one side, very right side, very far right parties. And ideologically, it just apparently with some of those tech bros, it just sits better. That's like the basic truth. They align with it much better because of various reasons, might be personal. The other thing is that those parties that they support are very much in favor of or against tech regulation or restrictions or ethics. So one of the reasons why the support is so big is obviously because the payout might be even better, right? We see that in the US election. For instance, before with the Biden administration, it's not as if AI was not important because it was, but there were more restrictions, right? The AI strategy was more on safety based. We had a lot of AI summits on safety and stuff. And that changed with President Trump and his government right now, because now the goal is not so much safety, but the goal is towards competition with China and winning the AI war. And AI has been catapulted as one of those national security imperatives that needs to, as a tool of ensuring national security. So right now it's about reins free, no regulation, and also open source and all of that things, right? So I find that's very important to understand in terms of strategy, why they support certain aspects. It kind of aligns. The far right parties in this case also align very much with the if you help me, I will help you, kind of, right? Like we are very business conducive. We are not about regulation. We will, like it's reciprocity in that sense, very reciprocal interest. So that's one of the reasons. And I think that's also one of the reasons why it's very important to to talk about sovereignty. Because what does it actually mean? It's not only about AI not being applied, because I mean, we are having this conversation. I'm very much pro tech and I'm very much pro AI. But I don't want tech companies being the ones that impose their rules on me as a society, because I find that their interests do not align with the majority of maybe the interests that we have contextually here. And if we do not develop our own models or systems, we are dependent on other models, restrictions, frameworks, and everything. So I find sovereignty is a very big aspect that every country actually needs to consider, right? Because once you become dependent on infrastructure from somebody else, the US, let's say, or China, because both are competing in that sense, trying to impose or sell their infrastructure, the tech stack that they offer, we are also bound to their frameworks. And whereas in Germany, we say Gestaltungsspielraum, we do not have the power then to to inhibit our room the way we want to, or live our democracy the way we want to, but we are actually bound to the rules that they have. We see that with the social media platforms, right? Because social media is something that we try to impose retroactively some regulation because it's systems that we do not own. And I'm not saying we should own or we should rebuild, but it's a very good example of what it actually means if you allow foreign tech to come in and set the rules. So maybe with AI, we should think twice. And I'm not saying reinvent the wheel, but actually be very much aware where you actually want to be sovereign at what aspect and where you can accept corporations and partnerships. Because once you become too dependent again in these systems, you start having a problem in the sense of you become dependent on the rules they set. And especially with AI, because it's not only a tool, it's going to be built into our infrastructure completely, right? In every sector and health, blah, blah. So I find that the question of sovereignty becomes very imperative. also within the EU, right? To what extent are we wanting partnerships? Who do we want to elaborate on partnerships? What can we offer those partnerships to protect each other? What are the kind of values that we want to protect? Do they align with others? So these are questions that need to be settled before. And I understand that, for instance, right now the US is playing a zero-sum game in terms of AI, right? It's either with us or against us. And if you're with us, you have to accept our tech stack. And I'm not sure it is the best decision for any other country. And I would also say it's not the end of the game because we are not in, this is not like the end of the Second World War where there are only two big powers. We have a lot of middle powers, especially India, for instance, the EU as well, or Latin America or other Asian countries. They're not so small anymore. So there is leverage. And I think it's very important to see that the field, although it's changing, it's very dynamic, it is dynamic. And we can find our space. So sovereignty is something that is very important to keep in mind because it's not about controlling, but it's about maintaining our democratic values and the ones, or being the ones that ourselves then change them and not being made to change. That's like very important in my aspect.
Just one clarification. So you do believe that foreign actors with bad intent, or when a country is too much dependent on foreign actors, might have the potential to sort of set the political discourse or create instability. It does happen, right?
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, it's not only via social media or bots. We are seeing, for instance, now last week, I think there was this article on Financial Times where it says social media has peaked, that people are actually not spending so much time on social media anymore. And I agree, except in the US, it's actually increasing, but every other country is decreasing. But I'm saying it's First of all, there's a fragmentation of social media ecosystems in general. We don't have like these four major players. We have Discord, Twitch. We have several others now that are being, so there's not this big use of, so we go more to niche platforms, especially younger people hang out more at Twitch or Discord, right? But then there's another thing that I find interesting. It's not that people spend so much time anymore on social media, but they also start spending a lot of time with AI companions. And I find this trend of AI companions slightly preoccupying because, again, it's systems that we do not design. We do not know what kind of imperative they have. And if you have somebody to talk to, you develop a parasocial relationship towards it because that's how we are. We are human beings. And suggestive manipulation could be occurring, and we do not see it because it's actually a private conversation. So, this is something, again, where I say, I'm not so sure if I'm happy if a certain company has my kid talking to their like, or the NSFW content, the explicit content that Elon Musk is now rolling out, or that Meta has been rolling out with children, or that OpenAI now is doing announcing 2 weeks ago about the erotic companions and possibilities that you have now. This whole, for me, the strategies are very obvious. It's about monetization, obviously, but it's also about creating dependencies. Because I mean, if you start having intimate relations with something, it's very much more difficult to change the tool because it might not be as quite good anymore, and you just switch over to something else. Because, I mean, you have an emotional attachment to that companion because we are humans. We're not the chatbot who just switches off and turns away.
Also, I feel that it has taken us so long to understand how social media can manipulate us. So
Yes.
it takes us so much longer to understand what ChatGPT companions can do to us. Right. To my last question, should there be some regulations regarding the use of AI in electoral campaigns? And do you have in mind some best practices from around the world that can sort of provide a clue?
I would more say best practices. I find, for instance, regulation is very limited in that sense. I think what should be regulated is if you use AI, you should be transparent about its use, especially as a political party. It shouldn't be something to be ashamed of because by now everybody does. So just be transparent about it. We use it in our communication systems. We use it for branding. It doesn't have to be in detail, but just being transparent about it. That's something that I find it could be also soft law, right? Like a code of conduct or something. But telling like political parties within that they should not use deepfakes to discredit, very difficult. We did that in the EU and all the disruptive far right parties, they signed up and then they didn't care. And since there are no sanctions or no consequences, it doesn't really matter because everybody else kept to it, but they didn't, but they signed up. So it depends, right? So I would say it should be transparently labeled. And if you set up a code of conduct, a soft law, then there should be also sanctions involved that everybody agrees to as well, because otherwise it comes across as the government is not in control, and then actually again helps the disruptive party because it shows them as not having the strength that they need, right? That there might be other parties that should actually be. So it's always a win-win for the parties that actually disrupt if there's no consequence, because ethics, as I said, for some parties on the short term is much more important than the long-term consequences. I would say in general, I would really wish for more governments to consider data privacy as being very imperative, because it actually protects democracy indirectly in the sense of being not other parties not being able to hyper-personalize messages to such an extent to fragment societies. Because we do have problems anyway via social media because of the fragmentation and the whole ongoing thing. If we create even with AI, the level of data that we can actually process is much more extensive. So it's actually easier, because that's why AI is so great, right? So that's what I would consider something being highly imperative, more so that the code of conduct is data protection for its citizens. Needs to be in place a minimum level that impedes certain parties to access data that, is able to then be used for campaigning in a way that is not voluntarily given. That's something that I would impose on. But the other things I would say, strengthen civil society or think tanks in order to create awareness of certain aspects always, right? And what I find, but we didn't really talk about, is for instance, the artificial way visibility and reach can be achieved on social media. That's something that is kind of known, but not by everybody. So these are campaigns that need to be media competency, obviously. But as I said again, that's kind of like, yes, we obviously always need media competency, but it's also a way of deflecting from the responsibles, because the ones that are the perpetrators of influence campaigns, they will continue if we do have the highest level of media competency or not. What I find very inventive, like very innovative, for instance, was in Taiwan, this chatbot that you were able to download and install on your WhatsApp in groups of family groups, for instance. So whenever there was some form of disinformation or whenever there is some deepfake content, that chatbot automatically says, okay, this is something that I found here, blah, blah, and it was debunked already. So it kind of diffuses the dark patterns that we have that are very hard to access. And these are things that are innovative, are also AI that actually contribute to confidence within societies. And those are things that should be promoted. That's why I'm saying, like, civil society needs to be helped and supported in order to play its role. And the state, because I find that the more you decentralize authority, the better it is for democratization. The more it is centralized, actually, the more it becomes a fragile point of contact, one point of contact only. So if you diffuse and help reach parts within that conversation that you might have, the living room, chat rooms. I find WhatsApp news is like the best, right? You have those groups of families, the 20, 25 groups, and then there's one thing, and then people start arguing. But if you have that chatbot installed, since the AI, it just doesn't stop. It just continues saying, no, no, it's wrong, blah, 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 and gives you all the facts. So that's a nice way to, a creative way of maybe helping out, that I find that it's not enough attention is being given to these solutions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muñoz, for joining us. And thank you for this very insightful conversation.
No, you're welcome. I had fun.
If you enjoyed watching this episode of Technocracy, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more AI-related conversation, you can also watch IGPP Expert Talks AI Special Series.